I'm Melissa Chan. Thanks for joining us. The United States will strengthen military cooperation with South Korea and has guaranteed to expand its nuclear commitment to the country, giving Seoul a central role in the strategic planning for the use of nuclear weapons in the event of war with North Korea. President Biden also pledged that any nuclear attack by Pyongyang would mean the end of Kim Jong Un's regime. These very serious discussions and decisions were announced during President Yoon Suk Yeol's 6-day state visit to the U.S., marking 70 years of friendship between the two countries. And this alliance could not have been better underscored than by the lavish dinner the White House threw for the visiting delegation, with President Yoon taking the stage and surprising guests with a performance of the classic hit song, American Pie.
Yes, when I was going to school, it was one of my favorite songs.
Well, we wanted to hear you sing it.
A long, long time ago, I still remember how that music used to make me smile. And I really felt my chains, that I could make those people dance and maybe they'd be happy for a while. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
Well, to see how that moment and the news have been received in South Korea, we have Do-yeon Kim joining us from Seoul. She is an adjunct senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security. Do-yeon, President Yoon's ratings back home haven't been great, but he seems to have won over the Americans.
Well, clearly he's won over the Americans. And I think that song, especially the choice of that song, reportedly being one of his favorite, I think that many Koreans would scratch their heads and wonder why, even though I personally think it's a great song.
Well, pivoting to the more serious matter of nuclear deterrence, when I was based in Asia and reporting from Seoul, one of the issues that always came up was that many South Koreans struggled to trust that the U.S. would ever risk, say, San Francisco or Los Angeles getting nuked in order to save Seoul. So is this what this new extended deterrence is about?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, to try to reassure South Koreans that the United States really has South Korea's back, and it will come to South Korea's defense at critical moments, especially in light of the North Korean nuclear threat. So I really think that this Washington declaration is a big win for the alliance, but especially for South Korea. It looks like President Yoon got everything he wanted this time, and perhaps even more. So, fundamentally, it's the first time that South Korea and the United States are discussing nuclear deterrence, which Seoul has not been able to discuss with Washington until now, for decades. This topic, for example, when and how would America use nuclear weapons against North Korea? This was considered by Washington to be too classified, it's believed Washington thinks of this as an American decision, not a joint decision, an American operation and an American execution plan. That's been the long traditional thinking in Washington, but they've really made significant progress, the allies, in terms of giving South Korea more of a role and a say in relaying some of its preferences on when, how the United States might have to use nuclear weapons to support that decision if that time comes, and to also learn more about American decision making and how the whole nuclear enterprise works.
So it sounds like this is a big deal. Will this commitment be enough for ordinary South Koreans? We've seen polling, and I'm sure Ukraine giving up its nukes years ago played into a lot of this thinking. But citizens in South Korea seem to prefer that the country go nuclear on its own.
Yeah, so, I think this declaration will reassure South Korean government officials and the military. But for those conservative South Koreans outside of government, they're criticizing the declaration already they're criticizing it as falling too short, that Seoul was not able to persuade America to base American nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, for example, or certain types of nuclear capable, what we call strategic assets on the Korean Peninsula. And so, I think that this Washington Declaration actually will not quiet those voices. And fundamentally, those voices are driven by two basic factors, and they are South Koreans watching North Korea continue to test weapons, continue to advance its nuclear weapons capability, and South Korean perceptions that Washington is not doing enough to solve the problem. So as long as these South Koreans perceive it that way, then South Korean voices for their government to develop its own nuclear weapons will naturally grow.
Du Yeon Kim, thank you so much for joining us.